All right, hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the book of Acts, chapter 15. Now, this chapter um, is extremely important for this reason. Paul is going to combat legalistic um, Judaizers, okay? Legalistic Judaizers. To give it away, there will be some Jews who will come to Antioch and try to persuade, try to command that the Gentiles be circumcised. Now, the problem with this, and this is something that's extremely important because the church has never ever gotten over the law. Salvation by the law, salvation by works. So the battle here is works versus faith. In other words, how do we get saved? How are we saved? How do we obtain salvation? That's what this chapter is going to represent. It is also, and I'm going to put it like this, in my opinion, going to represent the failure to correct the idea of, salvation by works. Now, you have this story here, but this would go on throughout the Christian church history. When we come to Catholicism, that the rise of Catholicism, I believe, is in the late 5th century, early 600s, like that. And then for really little over 1,000 years, the Catholic Church reigned supreme in Christianity, as well as some other things. But the dominant factor in the Christian church, and I'm using that word Christian very, very loosely, but the dominant factor in Christianity was the Catholic Church. In other words, if you were living, let's say, in the 8th century, you were a Catholic. There were no other denominations. There were no other ideologies. You were Catholic. Christianity was Catholic. Out of Catholicism, there was so much severe corruption, not only morally, but from a theological perspective. Even to this day, we have never gotten over Catholicism, the effect of Catholicism. And not to mention that the Catholic, of course, still remains the largest denomination worldwide, the Christian denomination worldwide, with like a billion, I think billion 1, billion 2, maybe a billion 4 members worldwide. The church has never gotten over Catholicism. So even when you come to Protestant denomination, which is non-Catholics, okay, the non-Catholic denominations, that you still have the baggage that they brought from Catholicism. Just look at the way, pretty much every denomination, how they do services. When you see the clergy dressed in the robes, the clerical garbs, that's baggage from Catholicism. In other words, That this is a religious way of doing things. This is a religious way, and it's pure religion. But in that is works that even like what the Catholics teach, that you must do something. You must do something in order to be saved, get to heaven, earn enough points. So we see the seeds right here as we're going to study this. We see the seeds of what would become Catholicism, and then work-based salvation, that you must do something. So let's get to it. This would help if I go to my scripture here. Let's see. Acts chapter 15. And by the way, we are a few years now. Remember, I don't know if this is, you could kind of guesstimate the time frame of this. And we were around 10 years after the resurrection, when we was Acts chapter 10. This is a few years now. Paul had been, he had completed his first, what is referred to as the first apostolic mission. So, and then remember they came back and to their home base, Antioch. Like I say, I would have loved to be a member of the Antioch church. But anyway, but now here are the issues that they had to face. Verse 1 says, some men came down from Judea and began to teach the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the customs prescribed by Moses, you cannot be saved. Now look at the statement here. Let's look at the statement, because you hear that same statement today in certain denominations. You cannot be saved if you wear pants, jewelry, or makeup. You cannot be saved if you drink wine. You cannot be saved, and then you can say ... Right? You cannot be saved if you don't belong to our church. But more so, this is kind of more serious, because notice this. They were trying to say that they were actually trying to marry grace and the law. Okay? So the question is, to me, some, I don't know, 15 years after the church began, now get this, that this is being taught. That's what kind of boggles my mind. Now, let me show you a verse of scripture to show you why this should have never existed. This should have never existed. This is going to be the New King James, but that's all right. I'm going to go to John 1. I want to read something from John 1. I'm going to read from verses 1 through 18. Okay? I'm going to be bothered if I do this. I'm going to go back to the Holman Christian Standard Translation. This is what I read from. And, all right. And I think I've explained why I read from the Holman Christian Standard. But watch, listen to this here. And I'm going to go through this chapter here because there's a point I want to make. And by the way, the Apostle John will be present when we later get into this. So I'm asking the question here: why is this doctrine being taught coming out of Jerusalem? That's the question. Why, after 15 years, Why is this doctrine being taught? All right, so John 1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through him, and apart from him, not one thing that was created that has been created. Life within him, and that life was the light of men. The light shined in the darkness, yet the darkness did not overcome it. Now, in John's gospel, by the way, this gospel from the time frame of Acts 15 would be written decades after. Decades. Probably in the area of 40 to 50 years. So this what this writing, when this writing here. So I'm going to say that you can't credit John in a sense for kind of knowing this, even though I think he certainly knew enough to whereas that what we saw in this doctrine being taught coming out of Jerusalem. And remember, Jerusalem was, if we was to make a comparison, when we think about the head city of Christianity, and keep in mind, I am using the word Christianity extremely loosely. In other words, Christianity isn't the name, or Jesus did not start Christianity. The Christianity was never named by Jesus as the religion of the believers. Man did that. So you can see I'm being footloose and fancy free with the terms here. But if you look at the most capital city of Christianity today, it would be Rome, Vatican City. Well, Jerusalem back then had even greater weight. Jerusalem was you can say the capital city of the faith. The original apostles operated out of Jerusalem. All of the 12, the original 12, including Matthias, but he was numbered with the 12. But the reason I'm including saying the original, because in order for Matthias to have been chosen to be one of the original apostles, was that he had to also had been with them from the beginning. So from the beginning of John the Baptist, Matthias was there. All right. But they operated out of Jerusalem. And as we're going to see with this controversy, they're actually going to go to Jerusalem about this issue, but we won't get to it today. So if you were to go back into church history, go back into history itself, how John, and this is why the reason why I'm kind of elaborating on this. You go back into the past. You go back into the past. And you see, you go past your birth, past the creation. You go back as far as it is possibly able to go back, the beginning of the universe, right? You would run into God. That's what he's saying right here. You would run into God. But here's the thing. Here's what you would see if God was to allow this. You would see the Word. And then what you would see with the Word, you would see the visible manifestation of the invisible God. So what you would see is the Word. That's what John is communicating right here. In the beginning was the Word. If you go back, that's what you would see. Out of all of what the greatness of God, omnipotence of God, you wouldn't see God the Father. You would see the Word. Okay? Now, watch this. So now I'm going to skip down to verse 14. There's a lot I could go through, but this verse 14 will have to suffice. He said, the Word became flesh and took up residency among us. We observed his glory. So now we know who the Word is. The Word is God. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. right? Because we have to get into the Trinity, the doctrine of the Trinity, or what is revealed about the Godhead, the persons of the Godhead. Okay, now, so here's what's important. The Word became flesh. So then he said, he took up residency among us. We observed his glory, the glory as of the one and only Son from the Father. So it was decided within the Godhead, the Word would reveal the Father. The Word would reveal the triune God, the omnipotent God is revealed in the person of the Word. He took upon flesh. But watch this. We observed his glory, the glory as of the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So in other words, what you saw in Jesus, if we were living in Galilee and then Jerusalem, we would have saw the grace and truth that revealed the Father. That's what Jesus came to do. This is what God chose in his wisdom, in his sovereignty. This is how the world would see. This is how the God, the creator God, would be revealed in the person of the Word, full of grace and truth. That's important because that's what God chose to see, to reveal. Okay, so if you were watching Jesus, that's what you would see. Now watch this. John testified concerning him and exclaimed, "This is the one of whom I said, the one coming after me has surpassed me because he existed before me." Verse 16, "Indeed, we have all received grace after grace from his fullness." Now look at verse 17. "For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, the one and only Son, the one who is at the Father's side. He has revealed him." So what did Jesus reveal? And in verse 17, it's most important when we get to Acts 15. The law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So which was more important? Which had the greater weight? So this whole thing, as we talk about, get into this discussion, this is important because, here's my point, the apostles should know this, should have known this. There's this, notice this, grace and truth. So even from the beginning, the Word became flesh. So if you are correctly making the correct observation about Jesus, about the Word, your takeaway is, we observed his glory, full of grace and truth. And then we receive grace after grace from his fullness. But notice this, the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So remember I said, let's go back to Acts 15 now. Some men came down from Judea and began to teach the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the customs prescribed by Moses, you cannot be saved. This is a false gospel. Because in the annals of time, God, and it was decided within the Godhead, Jesus would reveal the Father. But what did he reveal? Grace in truth. He did not reveal the law of Moses. So to say that you cannot be saved is a false gospel. And again, I'm going to ask the question, why was this being taught out of the Jerusalem church after some 15 years? But we'll get into that next time. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome, because I'm gonna linger for this on this issue here. I'm gonna linger on this issue because right now it still plagues us. And God in his wisdom gave us this truth, gave us this revelation, because what? This is one of the number one issues that Christians deal with, this idea of works by salvation. Salvation by works. Salvation by works. It's a false gospel. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next study.